No one suspected that Valerie Bertinelli was living the life of another when she grinned on TV for 9 years in a row. However, she was crumbling behind closed doors. She was married to a cheating, cocaine-addled man by the time she was 20. She filmed her shows while taking caffeine pills. She was deemed useless by her second spouse. After 64 years, she snapped. She published a book that exposed every lie, stopped drinking, and stopped weighing herself. It was always someone else you thought was the girl next door. Wilmington, Delaware is the site of Valerie Bertinelli's birth on April 23, 1960. Unfortunately, her family had already suffered a tragedy before she was even born. 2 years prior to Valerie's birth, her older brother Mark drowned while just 17 months old. Both of her parents, Andrew and Nancy, never got over it. As a child, Valerie felt the presence of a child she never knew. A preoccupation with security developed in her mother. Glass encased Valerie. She was not merely observed, but shielded from harm. She can still feel her mother's unwavering grip in vintage family portraits. The urge to be flawless at all times was something Valerie had never understood, yet she dealt with it daily nevertheless. From the outside looking in, her life was changed in ways no one could have predicted. Psychologists refer to this as being a replacement child. No family ever stayed put for more than a short while. Throughout Valerie's formative years, her family relocated 8 times across 4 states. Her dad was a General Motors employee, and with each advancement came a move to a different place. Proceeding from Michigan, we will stop in Oklahoma City, Pontiac, Wilmington, California, and finally, Los Angeles. Throughout her academic career, Valerie attended no more than 15 different schools. She quickly became friends with everyone she met and was able to blend in wherever she went. She eventually came to refer to this tendency to adapt her appearance to fit in with her surroundings as her chameleon complex. What she did as a means of subsistence eventually became her acting forte. She had spent her entire life acting, so she didn't merely play the part, she became it. On July 26, 1972, everything shifted. Elena was 12 years old. The day of the Little Talent Showcase, her mom nearly didn't show up because her dad considered the $50 to be a waste. However, they proceeded anyhow. Woolworths sold Valerie a $12 outfit, and she sung "I Don't Know How to Love Him" while dressed up. With 347 other children taking the stage, she was the 47th. I sensed an unfamiliar quality in both her speech and demeanor. A casting director named Ruth Birch was in the audience and noticed it right away. She remarked that Valerie possessed the spirit of an elderly person. Birch signed Valerie's mom that night, albeit 3 scouts had approached her before. More than $40 million in revenues were generated by the $50 tournament. If Hollywood history is to be believed, it was the smartest investment ever. The part that would launch Valerie's career came just 3 years afterwards, but she lied in order to acquire it. Her One Day at a Time audition was on March 15, 1975. Her age was 16, but she claimed to be 15. She went so far as to forge her birth certificate. Why? Why? Because 16-year-olds can legally work more hours without a parent or guardian present, according to California's labor rules. Cheating the system was her only option if she wanted to be treated like the older girls. For 73 days, it was effective. Then her school records were found to be inaccurate by a production assistant. Finally, Valerie confessed. She was not fired by the show's creator, Norman Lear. He was astounded. In his words, she was prepared, fearless, and astute. But the deceit cost them more than $127,000 in fines from the law and the union. Money like that was taken directly out of Valerie's future wages. Lear saw more than simply Valerie's talent. Suddenly, he recognized something. On March 22nd, at her last screen test, he had her act out a divorce for her character. She began to weep openly. Little did anyone know that her own parents were quietly contemplating a divorce during that period. Something about her was shattered, and Lear recognized it from his own youth. Her expression was identical to the troubled one he'd seen in his childhood reflection, he wrote later. In that instant, an unusual connection was formed between them. The king's protectiveness became excessive. The other actors on the show thought she was getting preferential treatment. It was fair treatment, though. That was acknowledgement. He recognized himself in her. At the age of 15, Valerie made her television debut in December 1975. She broke ground as one of television's youngest leading ladies. Valerie was making hundreds of dollars every episode, while her summer work counterparts were barely making $2.10 an hour. Adolescents typically put aside money specifically for prom dresses. People all throughout the nation were sending fan mail to Valerie. However, being famous did not grant liberation. A cage, that was. She portrayed Barbara Cooper for a span of 9 years, beginning in 1975 and ending in 1984. On top of that, Barbara Cooper was flawless, powerful, and full of joy at all times. Both on and off camera, Valerie had to embody that character. She felt stifled by the character that everyone else adored. As the show became more successful, there was a lot of action behind the scenes. Things that impacted Valerie hard included financial troubles, loneliness, and divorce. She was experiencing those hardships firsthand. On film, she had to keep a grin even while her family was silently coming apart. Each episode took her on an emotional roller coaster that she wasn't prepared for. Still, she gave birth because she felt compelled to. She felt like she had a second mother figure in her co-star, Bonnie Franklin. However, there were tough times. Franklin kept a close eye on Valerie. The way she dresses, her weight, and even her romantic partners. Not even a typical adolescent could inspire Valerie to rebel. A public gaffe would be too embarrassing for her. Franklin referred her to counseling after she confided in him that she felt like she was about to collapse. Though kind, it was distant. Like issues on a film set, Valerie's breakdowns were dealt with professionally. Easy to fix and handle, but never really intimate. Her schooling also took a hit. Child actors in California were only obliged to attend school for 3 hours a day. Valerie received a bare minimum. She was absent from prom, graduation, and all the other rites of passage that normalize adolescence. Valerie spent her time memorizing scripts and posing for cameras, while her classmates were learning to drive and talking in the corridors. She didn't experience life as a teenager for 9 years. She was a walking, talking TV figure. And as the program came to a close, she had to figure out how to be authentic once more. Despite her wealth, she lacked independence by the time she was a teenager. That made Barbara Cooper pleased. It wasn't Valerie Bertinelli. With each payday, she was reminded that the world adored the person she was posing as. She became further estranged from her authentic identity as it persisted. Her love tale came next. August 1980 was the beginning of it all. One Day at a Time had already made Valerie Bertinelli famous when she was just 20 years old. The untamed guitarist Eddie Van Halen, who was 25 years old, was illuminating rock venues across. Their paths crossed in the backstage area of the Shreveport, Louisiana Van Halen show. Eddie stopped what he was doing when he saw Valerie. He had been speaking to someone else. Without further ado, he moved up to her without stopping the chat. His wallet had been containing a magazine clipping featuring her for months. His bandmates heard him repeatedly proclaim his intention to marry the girl. It turns out he had even attempted to sneak backstage at her TV tapings on prior occasions. However, he was rejected by security. Eddie was so anxious and stoned when they eventually met that he hardly spoke. He trembled with fear. Nostril rubbing persisted. Regardless, he succeeded in asking her out. There was more to it than meets the eye. It was the culmination of an obsession. Nothing about their first date was typical. They started at 2 in the afternoon and stayed until 10 in the morning in a West Hollywood coffee shop. A total of 8 hours. Eddie spoke out most of the time. As he sipped cup after cup of coffee and revealed everything, he chain-smoked. He boasted to her that he had been reading her photographs in TV Guide for more than a year, indulging himself. He went into great length about his dreams for their future, including their house and family size. To soothe his anxiety before meeting her, he even admitted to using cocaine. Valerie was caught in a state of awkwardness, unsure of how to respond. She had never been so desired. The guitar was next. Eddie performed a song he composed about her prior to their meeting on a little acoustic guitar he had brought along. He crooned about her radiant smile and the way she sparked his soul. That was a lot to take in. In April of 1981, after only 8 months, Eddie made his proposal official. A diamond ring designed to resemble a guitar pick cost him $25,000. Behind the gesture, though, was anarchy. For 3 days, he had been awake. He had a numb state of mind and was paranoid. He then got down on one knee after making Valerie inspect every window and door. We spent more than an hour on the proposal. As he attempted to divide them, Eddie veered off into bizarre tirades about the music industry and malevolent forces. But the worst part was that he was unable to select even a single ring. After purchasing 3, he instructed her to select the one that resonated with her deeply. It lacked romance. That was unsettling. They tied the knot at a large Westwood church on April 11, 1981. 1,000 people. A-listers galore. With today's exchange rates, the event would cost more than $350,000. The fantastic story, however, quickly fell apart. Due to his intoxication, Eddie muddled his vows. He was compelled to decipher them from a tattered scrap of paper. According to Valerie, she almost left the ceremony in the middle of it. Eddie murmured something that broke her heart on their first dance. Before he walked down the aisle, he informed her that he had recently used cocaine in the church bathroom. Subsequently, he inquired as to whether she would also favor some. She is shown smiling in their wedding images. Not joy, though. It was startling. Just 4 days were all that the honeymoon had. To Hawaii, they soared. Sundowners and strolls down the beach were Valerie's fantasy. Instead, Eddie would often be found dozing off or cooped up in the restroom. In his guitar case, he had hidden more than $3,000 worth of cocaine. Valerie discovered him comatose on day 3, with a bloodied nose. Hotel security was contacted by her. She was accused of infidelity by the hotel personnel when he regained consciousness. Concerning conspiracies, he yelled out. Paranoid and violent, he was a maniac. She found out then that he had been a daily cocaine user for about 2 years prior to their meeting. She had her heart broken by a fake guy. The drugged-out version of him was him. Chaos ensued for the following 20 years. A worsening of Eddie's addiction was observed. He was a chronic user of alcohol, cigarettes, and narcotics. Val tried to be of assistance. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to comprehend. Behind closed doors, she was crumbling. I despised the booze and drugs, but I never despised him, she stated once. I felt his anguish. She was married at the tender age of 21. The emotional burden of loving an addict was too much for her to handle at the time. Plus, Eddie cheated. The marriage began to fall apart. After Eddie passed away, Valerie confessed that she mentally rewrote their history, heightened the impression of romance beyond what it actually was. The reality, however, continued to surface. It was complete anarchy, she observed. There was no genuine affection, concern, or support. At the height of Eddie's addiction, they tragically lost a pregnancy. That loss compounded their suffering. Wolfgang was born to them in 1991. However, their relationship had already begun to deteriorate at that point. By herself, Valerie fought. Her career struck a wall with the 1984 end of One Day at a Time. Two of her sitcoms, Café American and Sydney, were abruptly cancelled, and she appeared in modest TV movies. She played whatever part that came her way for a long time. The situation became more challenging after her 2001 separation from Eddie. She made no requests for child support or alimony. They just decided to split Wolfgang's expenses. However, she was rapidly running out of funds. There weren't many employment available to someone in her 40s. At that point, she started representing Jenny Craig. It was much more than just slimming down. Survival was key. Valerie had more than simply financial troubles behind closed doors. It broke her sense of self-worth. "I always thought I was unlovable if I gained weight," she added. There were lasting wounds from sharing a home with someone who was always high and gone. She had a hard time recognizing her own strengths. Even though she was physically tired, she continued to smile for the cameras. Valerie started to confront the reality when Eddie passed away in 2020. Behind their public persona, she confessed, they led a pretty low-key life. As polar opposites, the media had portrayed them as America's sweetheart and the wild rocker. However, there was more to each of them than met the eye. The anguish was palpable, despite their best efforts to conceal it. After the fact, Valerie admitted that she had fantasized about their marriage for far too long. Years passed before it became clear that it had been poisonous all along. Hot in Cleveland, auditionee Valerie Bertinelli was 50 years old. Since the end of Touched by an Angel in 2003, she had not been a regular on any television show. It had been 7 years. After all that, she was asked to co-host a comedy series with Betty White, even though her offers had dried up and her spotlight had dimmed. With a career spanning more than 60 years, Betty was a living legend at the age of 88. It was terrifying for Valerie. In the nights leading up to filming, she fretted that she had lost her edge, her timing, and her spark. If she wanted to get even one laugh out of her lines, she would record them again and over again and practice until she got it perfect. Her gut churned at the idea of embarrassing herself in front of Betty White. Soon after, on June 16, 2010, the show debuted. Not only did Hot in Cleveland survive, it blew up. Its average viewership was 2.5 million. Such figures had never been seen by TV land before. Despite her unexpected return, Valerie remained anxious. The stakes were consequently enhanced. Betty may have been the eldest cast member, but Valerie was considered the leader and guide. She had years of experience and was relied upon by producers to establish the mood. Valerie had the longest resume, although Jane Leeves and Wendy Malick were the other prominent cast members. She ought to have felt more assured after that. Rather, it broke her heart. Attempting to control the waves of panic episodes, she would sneak away between scenes, hiding in her trailer and writing in her journal. 2 hours before each table read, she showed up with scripts in hand, lines committed to memory, and the whole thing practiced. Not even for a second did she want to be unprepared. A second season of the show was greenlit barely 2 months following its debut. That was supposed to be good news, but pressure was all Valerie experienced. Greater exposure, more viewers, and more opportunities for her to bomb. 13 episodes made up the first season, and that was only the start. At about that time, an unforeseen event occurred. A man named Tom Vitale crossed her path. The year was 2010. A grueling 14-hour day on set had recently concluded for Valerie. In Aventura, Florida, she dined alone at Wolfie Cohen's Rascal House to relax. Tom approached her to say hi after noticing that she was sitting alone. He had no Hollywood connections. He had a career in finance and was 44 years old, making him 6 years Valerie's junior. His marital status was non-existent. His focus was solely on her. He had no desire for fame. Their initial outing occurred 5 days subsequently. By the third week, they had become inseparable. For all that her background lacked, Tom stood for it all. No upheaval, just calm. Tom was a welcome change of pace following Eddie Van Halen's 2007 divorce and a lifetime of turbulent relationships. Talks of marriage had already begun by Christmas. Why bring down someone you had feelings for in the past? That puts an end to the feelings of love you two formerly shared. Wedding ceremonies were held in Malibu by Valerie and Tom on January 1, 2011. Precisely 100. Little, uncomplicated, and peaceful. This was in stark contrast to her first wedding, a 300-person celebrity affair. This time, she sported an off-the-rack gown that set her back $800. Missing designer? Missing press. Wolfgang and Eddie Van Halen were also in attendance. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, Valerie subsequently acknowledged that the wedding seemed rushed. It had only taken her 6 weeks to plan. It was important to her not to give it too much thought. All she wanted was something ordinary. Feeling settled was her goal. She was determined to show that this time she was successful. However, nothing slowed down. There was an increase in difficulty. The hectic pace of Hot in Cleveland's second season was in full force. The majority of days began far before dawn. At the latest, Valerie was required to report to the set no later than 5:30 in the morning. It was 10 o'clock before she would go. There were a lot more episodes than she was accustomed to, 20 to 23 each season. She was in need of vitality, but coffee was no longer providing it. She started taking caffeine tablets at that point. Day, between 400 and 600 milligrams. It is equivalent to consuming 6 robust cups of coffee. Subsequently, Monster and Red Bull emerged as energy beverages. Occasionally, 4 cans in a single day. Next, modafinil. She was initially given it to help her concentrate. However, she began to rely on it too much. It helped her get through sequences, maintain her sharpness, and be hilarious. Quietly, everyone was unaware. All of it was concealed by her. Keep her trailer stocked, her aide was instructed. In order to be at her top performance for filming, she meticulously timed her every move, including when to take her medicines and consume her energy drinks. That was successful. Her punctuation was impeccable. Her antics were funny, but the truth was known to her. She was attempting to keep her composure while performing under the influence of chemicals. Things started to change for Valerie Bertinelli on August 8, 2015, after she had become largely known as a beloved comedy star.